The rest of that next week was excruciating. The burning itch of taking another pill just tingled through my body every second I was awake. I even had dreams of the crazy rave hallucination from the first pill. I cleaned my house. I slowly got it set up for my next trip that Friday night. I also called and messaged my friends, telling them about my experience and how insane this new drug was. They all acted like it was interesting, but too intense for them, so I called them all a bunch of pussies, and we laughed about it. That Friday morning, I set my tripping supplies out before I left to work. My plan was to get home and take the second pill as soon as I got home and changed. The day itself felt long, and it was hard to concentrate at work because, well, I've been waiting all week for this next trip. I was hoping to go back to another similar trip of a massive party, and that's that same insanely good feeling. The thought and anticipation didn't leave my mind the entire week. As the day concluded and I left for work, I again sped home to my drug sanctuary and excitedly ran into the house. I took a quick shower, and after feeling very clean and putting on comfy clothes, I retrieved my bottle of magic little green pills, dumped them out on the coffee table in front of my couch, found the one labeled 2, and threw it to the back of my throat, chasing it down with a big glass of orange juice. The second pill seemed to hit a little quicker, and within just a few minutes I again saw the black hole-like orb form in the middle of my living room. I stared in awe as this thing began to stretch floor to ceiling, the edges of which swirled with an earthy brown fog. For a split second I thought if that may have meant anything, but the thought was quickly fleeting as the blackness stretched again, touching the walls and then plunging me into complete darkness. The smell of mold and rot filled my nostrils as the rush of air hit me this time. The blackness began to fade around me, revealing a strange landscape covered in mud and mushrooms. Mushrooms of all sizes covered every inch of ground. Some were tiny, fleshy little stalks, while others were as big as skyscrapers, and other smaller mushrooms grew off of them. The different types were nearly endless. The air was heavy with what seemed like a constant fog of brown spores floating through it as I stood perfectly motionless. The absolute and unyielding silence was truly deafening. "Hello?" I called out, just above a whisper. Just at the edge of my vision, I saw a few of the mushrooms recoil and flinch at the sound, while others began to glow. A very peculiar one next to me that looked like a thin, clear tube with a clear balloon on top vibrated with the sound. Then, suddenly, the bulge at the top burst, releasing spores and gases into the air. I erupted in uncontrollable laughter as it did, and the gases hit me. The sound of my laughter caused others to vibrate and burst, continuing the cycle as I simply could not stop laughing. After what felt like hours, my cheeks and ribs were in such excruciating pain that I had fallen to the ground, clutching my sides. All I wanted was for it to stop, but I could not do anything to make it. Suddenly, I was covered in what felt like a big fleshy blanket. The laughing quickly stopped because I was now desperately gasping for air. And just as I began to fight off the feeling of passing out, a large mushroom cap was pulled off of me, and in front of me stood a very strange creature. Long brown tendrils flowed from the top of its head, looking almost like dreadlocks. Big alien eyes that had many colors to them, but didn't focus around a pupil like my eyes did. It was thin and had 4 long, thin arms coming from its torso, ending in odd 4 stubby-fingered hands. Thin but muscular thighs with unusually jointed legs, almost like that of a dog, where it bends backwards and then forward. It had a very flat nose, almost like that of a cat. It had full lips, very small, flat teeth. It was naked, and I guessed it was female of some sort because it had very human-like breasts and, well, everything else. The thing would have been almost attractive if it hadn't been so alien. It looked at me in silence, very inquisitively as I stood up. I began to say thank you, but before I could get the words out, the creature's arm shot up and covered my mouth. It gripped my face so tight it hurt, and I stepped in closer until our faces were mere inches apart. I felt the drugs tingle in my system as I got the shivers from being touched, the same as when somebody rubs your back or massages your hand when you're rolling on Molly. As strange as this trip was, the sense of euphoria was still there. I had some crazy hallucinations before, but this new drug was amazing. The creature peered into my soul with its strange eyes as I stood motionless in its grasp. Then it let me go. Letting me fall to the ground, I slowly began to stand back up, and the creature motioned for me to follow. As I took my first step after it, everything went black. The pressure of acceleration hit my chest, and the sound of rushing air exploded around me. As my vision came back, I was standing in nothing but my boxers in the backyard in front of a tree. When my brain finally caught up with what I was seeing, I looked around my yard in complete bewilderment. I coughed twice, and with each one a plume of brown spores exploded from my mouth. What the fuck? I whispered to myself, before turning to walk back inside. But I got closer to the house, the sudden urge to vomit came back, and I crashed to my hands and knees in the yard. I retched, and the slushing sound rang out as I puked up what looked like dirt and chunks of mushroom. Eventually, I got up and made my way back inside, utterly confused. This was only compounded by what I saw when I got back in my living room. My couch, and tables, and various other surfaces had mushrooms growing from them. Okay. Seriously, what the fuck? I thought, as I brushed some of the toadstools away onto the floor before sitting down to stare at the room. What the hell was happening? Why is my house covered in mushrooms? I mean, it's just a drug. Drugs can't do that. During my mental debate of what was happening, from behind me came the ring of my phone. Now, this time I had plugged it in and set it on the counter before I took the pill as a precaution. I picked up my achy and confused body and moved over to the counter to check my phone. It was my friend Steve from work, so I answered. Hello? I stated groggily, my throat still sore from vomiting. Dude, what the fuck is going on? You better call management and explain something good. They are super pissed that you have no call, no showed the past 2 days. What? What? Man, what the fuck are you talking about? Are you serious right now? Where have you been? It's Tuesday night and nobody has heard from you since you ran out of work on Friday. Are you okay? My heart sank as I heard him say that over the phone. I pulled my phone away from my ear and looked at the screen. 7:46 p.m. Tuesday. 4 days. I'd been tripping out over one pill. A part of me was impressed, and part of me was completely enraged that I had missed 2 days of work. Yeah, I'm okay, man. I just had some family stuff going on. I'll give management a call and explain, I lied. But I wasn't sure which was the bigger lie. The fact I didn't have any family stuff going on, or if I was really okay. Okay, man, I'm sorry to hear that. Anything I can do to help? He asked with only half concern in his voice, both of us knowing it was an empty offer. No, I'll be okay. Probably better call management, though. Thanks for the heads up, man. I'll talk to you later. Yeah, no problem. Later, man. He finished as we both hung up. My face fell to the palm of my hands, and the phone slipped out of my hand and made a thud as it hit the counter. What bullshit story was I going to make up to tell my boss? After I thought about it for a while, I went with a relative dying, and by the end of our conversation, filled with profuse apologizing by me, it seemed like they bought it, and I gotten the rest of the week off in addition. I ran out into my living room from the bar stool that I was sitting on and the kitchen counter in complete disbelief. There was a lot of cleaning to do, and truth be told, I was already building excitement to try another pill, though I knew I should probably wait, but I did just get the rest of the week off, so maybe we'll see how I felt when I got out of the shower and got the house cleaned back up. With that decision made, sore and still coughing up clouds of brown spores for some reason, I managed to get myself upstairs to the shower. I took some Tylenol for my achy body and dressed directly into comfy clothes, basketball shorts, and a t-shirt. Still having mild, troublesome breathing, my lungs felt so dry it made it hard to take a solid breath. As I came back downstairs, I began to carry the trash can around with me, picking and scraping the mushrooms off everything. I tried my hardest to wrap my head around what had truly happened. How it had possibly been 4 days later. Why mushrooms had grown all over my living room. No matter how hard I tried to fit reason to these questions, the only two things that kept prevailing inside of my skull were, I want to go back there. And I have the whole week off. I should just take another one. How odd all of this was, and how I seemed to have blatant marks and signs that maybe these weren't just hallucinations, never seemed to click that there was anything wrong. Or if it did, my new addiction was clearly ignoring it. I cleaned my house and ate some food. I ate so much food. The second it touched my lips, I devoured everything I had cooked. Still hungry, I made even more and practically inhaled that as well. I ate like I hadn't seen food before. I hadn't even realized I was hungry until that first bite. And when I was done gorging myself, I sat on the couch and tried to turn the TV on to watch a show or a movie. Really just anything to relax me and try to take my mind off of taking another one of those glowing pills so soon. Nothing worked, and eventually, I succumbed to the incessant craving. I stormed out of the living room and grabbed the bottle from the bathroom. Setting it on the table, I grabbed juices and waters from the fridge. Why, I'm still not so sure, because I hadn't drank any of them either of the times before. I sat on the couch having a losing staring contest with a pill bottle on the coffee table. Fine! Why the fuck not? I yelled at the bottle. I picked it up off the table and opened it. Tilting the bottle, I let the last 3 capsules tumble out into the glass of the tabletop. Spent a few more seconds, my body still trying to resist the urge to take it, before I picked up the first one. 5 was inscribed on it, and I threw it to the back of the bottle. I grabbed another. 3. Sat staring back at me. And I shivered. I took a deep breath, and I opened a bottle of water, throwing the small pill down my throat. I drank the entire bottle of water. I had just enough time to scoop the last pill back up into the bottle and close the lid before the tingle started in my shoulders and in my chest. I sat back and I watched as another black hole formed in my living room, the edges swirling with that green mist. I swear I heard a faint scream as it expanded into the room, rocketing me into a complete darkness. The rush hit me as my already sore and tired body hurled forward into the depths of the drug. I first heard the sounds of the faint drum and yelled, "Yes! It's another rave hallucination!" That glimpse of hope suddenly retreated as the sounds of strange otherworldly animalistic sounds joined in. The darkness began to fade, and I saw that I was sitting on a fallen tree in a very unfamiliar jungle. The drums had already begun to sound more tribalistic, and I realized that there clearly was no rave. The trees, if you could call them that, looked as though they were made of flesh. They were smooth and rubbery. Instead of leaves, there were hundreds of small, transparent bulbs sprouting from each branch that bent in very odd angles. The air all around me was filled with a cacophony of animal sounds that I had never heard before. A purple shimmering mist floated through the air like the fog of a humid rainforest. I began to make my way through all the strange plants towards the sound of the drums. Glowing leaves and bulbs brightened and sparkled as I brushed past them. A creature that looked strikingly similar to a centipede crawled up one of the trees, shiny and black with hundreds of sharp, pointed legs. It was 2 foot wide and easily 6 foot long. It was enormous. One end sat up away from the rest of its body and almost a torso. 6 more arms protruded from the sides with strange, sharp, almost crab-like pincers attached to the ends. It had no real neck, but the head held 4 massive white insectile eyes and 2 sets of sharp pincer-like jaws. I froze as it turned and stared right at me. A thick black liquid dripping from its mandibles as it looked inquisitively at me. My heart raced, and all I could think was, holy shit, bad trip. What do I do? After a few extremely long seconds, the creature turned away from me and traveled off away. I finally took a breath, not realizing I had been holding it once it was out of sight. Anxiety rose in my throat when I realized that while I was locked in the giant centipede centaur's gaze, the drums had stopped. And this meant I was completely lost and had no idea of what direction to go. No sound to follow. A screechy roar erupted behind me, and as I spun around, I saw nothing but more alien plants. I turned back around and began running in what I was hoping was the direction the drums were coming from before they stopped. As I ran, a sudden sharp sting of pain hit my leg, and I looked down to see a huge gash in my calf that had begun to bleed profusely. I didn't care. It's only a hallucination, I kept telling myself. I kept moving, hobbling the best I could, and I soon broke through the tree line into a small clearing. Before me stood a large rock formation, surrounded by glowing purple grass-like plants. The second I burst through the tree line into the clearing, I was met with a sudden, complete silence. The silence lasted but a few seconds as I hobbled towards the rock, and each step disturbed the grass, causing it to brighten and then dim like a light bulb burning out. A second roar tore through the silence behind me, and as I turned to look back, I saw what looked like, well, a featherless turkey. It looked like a turkey. The turkey-looking creature had a much longer and much sharper beak, and instead of wings, it had arms that it used to crawl like a bat would. Its flesh was deep red and smooth. The eyes were entirely bird-like, and it jerked and cocked its head around to change its view like birds do. What the fuck, a space turkey? Really? I said out loud to it, just before it turned one of its eyes to me, and its entire face ripped open, revealing hundreds of sharp teeth. It let out a huge roar, and I jumped scrambling to the top of the rock. Holy fucking shit, what the fuck is that thing? I yelled as I climbed the rock. The creature raced towards me as I got closer, and the rock began to rumble underneath me, and what I thought was just a rock was so much more. The turkey creature got closer, and whatever it was I was sitting on suddenly lunged and swallowed the smaller creature in one bite. I fell off the back as it lunged, slamming onto the ground, my heart racing as I did my best to get to my feet and run back into the tree line. I looked back as I made it to the trees, just in time to see what looked like a giant toad settle back down and look like nothing more than a rock again. Wounded and tired, I moved much slower. I began to get hungry, which seemed odd because I'd never had a desire for food while on drugs before. I also became incredibly thirsty. I wished I could break from my hallucination just long enough to grab a bottle of water from the floor in my living room. I was truly terrified. I wish I could break away from my hallucination completely, just for that reason. And soon I began to hear through the booming sound of this alien jungle, a sound that excited me. A sound very familiar to me. It was a sound of rushing water. I began to pick up my pace as best I could, dragging my wounded body towards the water, and after a few minutes, I came to the source of the sound. It was a river, a big, swirling, fluorescent yellow river. I didn't care. I ran to the water's edge, and I plunged my entire head into the river and drank. It tasted odd, like a mixture of peppermint and salt. But again, I didn't care. I drank until I couldn't drink anymore, and then I sat by the water's edge, contemplating my despair. All I wanted was for this trip to end, to snap out of my hallucination and take a shower, eat some food from my kitchen. Then I thought about my desire for food and the wound in my leg. Worry crept into my mind, and the thought of, what if this isn't a hallucination, surfaced in my mind. I felt my mind on the edge of fracturing as I began to talk to myself. What are you gonna do, man? I don't know. What if I'm stuck here? This is what you get, man. This is what you get for being such an addict. Shut the fuck up. I'll be fine. I just need food. Yeah, it's the first thing you're trying to eat is gonna kill you. You don't know shit about jungle survival. You've seen shows. I can handle this. This is a hallucination of an alien jungle. How the fuck are you going to handle this? Fuck. Stop talking to yourself. Get up. Find something that looks edible. Keep moving. This will all end soon. With that, I stood up and began to move along the edge of the river. I thought that if I could just follow the river, I might find something. I thought about maybe running into a small village that may be where the drums had been coming from. All I was really worried about was staying alive in my mind until this horrific trip was over and the hallucination would stop. If in the back of my mind I noticed that the drink from the river did quench my thirst, so the possibility of this being real and not a hallucination may hold a little more weight than I thought. I began making my way down the edge of the river, looking at the plants and trees, contemplating how hungry I was. My mind had been right. Nothing here looked even remotely edible, and if it did have a hint of being something I could put in my stomach, it at least looked poisonous. Damn it, I'm so fucked, I muttered to myself as I walked. I had just climbed down an alien tree when I heard a series of odd clicking noises. I swiveled my head, trying to see if I could find the source. I paused, partially hidden behind the downed tree, when I saw it. The giant centaur centipede creature was back. Its legs clicked on the rocks as it made its way to the edge of the water. It bent its torso down and took a drink from the river. Then, as it sat back upright, I turned looking both directions along the edge of the water. Oh, fuck that, I whispered and began to scoot more towards the cover into the jungle. As it turned to look in my direction, it easily noticed me, and with speed I could barely comprehend, it came after me. I barely got a few scoots towards the tree before it covered the 50 yards between us. As it got to me, it reached out its arms and pinned me to the ground, its pincers like hands digging into my arms and legs as it held me against the rocks. It screamed in my face with the most horrific sound it had ever made. It reared back to end me, and suddenly, the rush, the pressure, everything went black. Screaming, I opened my eyes. I was sitting in the backseat of my car. The sky around me was dark, it was night. My heart was racing and I was breathing so heavily. I began to get out of the car to go back inside when a searing pain exploded in my leg. Looking down, I noticed the gash was still there. I checked my arms and legs. The cuts from the giant centipede creature were there also. Holy shit. Is this real? I said out loud as I forced myself to move through the pain and go inside. I entered my living room and again saw most of my stuff knocked over and began to think that it may have something to do with the black orb that kept expanding in that room. I stumbled over and I picked up one of the drinks from the floor, proceeded to chug it. I looked down at my leg and realized that it was still bleeding pretty badly. I had a trail of blood all the way from my car. I went to the bathroom to search for whatever first aid kit I had, and as I opened it, I realized it was truly little more than a couple of small band-aids. This wouldn't do. I grabbed an old shirt, I tied it tighter on my wound. I was going to have to go to the hospital. I knew I was going to need stitches. The old shirt stopped the bleeding for long enough for me to search the fridge for something to scarf down really quickly and hastily clean myself up a bit before getting back into the car and taking myself to the hospital. At the hospital, I gave some bullshit story about how I had tripped over a sharp shovel, cutting my leg and landing on a grass rake or something, trying to explain the obvious pincer marks on my arms and shoulders. I doubt anyone truly believed me, but it was at least enough for them to stitch me up and send me on my way. The entire time, even though I had just gone through hell, only two thoughts remained in the front of my mind. The first being that I was going to call my dealer when I got home and bitch him out. And the second was that I couldn't stop the desire of taking the next pill. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video. Or listening to tonight's podcast on the podcast, if you're listening to that there at Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you can happen to listen to podcasts. Also, I just want to take a quick second to tell you guys about HorrorConVR. HorrorConVR is actually a horror convention that I'm putting together with a group of my friends who are YouTube horror creators and other horror creators and just sometimes VRChat creators and things like that. You can find out more at HorrorConVR.com or follow us on Twitter at horror_VR. It's going to be hosted on VRChat in October, and the best part is you do not need a VR headset to be able to join and play. So check out those places, join us on Discord, and we do meetups every Saturday, which is fun. And of course, I wanted to give a big thank you to everyone who checks out patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta and supports the show, keeps the light on, gives me treats for my now 2 cats, both Hylas and Hercules. Both of them are a handful. And especially a big thank you to Saha, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Mazikeen, Ken Lando Higuchi, Chompski, Nico kaeo, Tristain Pelton, Stephen VanHuss, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, G. Weevil 3, TheRedOakShieldVirus, Hades' Nephew, Carter Barenfanger, Dr. Strawberry, Jordan Wayne Deckard, Bradney Leipe, The Government Monitoring System, Anne Charron, rumblefox, AcidSystem, Mike Bullock, Raphael Rodriguez, Dan Sweet, Mad Marstomp, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Sean Mills, Brian Arce, Cryptic Nightmares, Shadow Morningstar, Somber Puppet, Brianna Wright, Someone You Love, Said the King 56, Bad Honey, S-Man, Kiri the Sloth, Patrick Schoolmeister, Thomas Burgett, Barbara Maceo, Bobby Carmen, Liam Newman, The Homeless Bird 93, Sky Harbor, Caleb Dougal, Last Blade Song, Eliminator 86, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, and Corey X Kenshin. A big thank you to all of you guys and everybody down there in the description. I really can't thank you guys enough for supporting the show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. and everybody who listens, sweet dreams.